100 years ago, tobacco was king for the Appalachian farmer. But boy, did it take some work. My papa once told me that it took 13 months a year to do it. That's right. It was estimated that it took 900 hours of manual labor to grow, harvest, and process just 1 acre of tobacco for the market. The majority of the work was done by hand, with very little reliance on machinery or even animal labor. The typical tobacco farmer in Appalachia at the time would count on his family, some hired help, and neighbors or other farmers for large tracts of land. They would all share in the work of growing and harvesting a tobacco crop. Now, before the farmer planted anything in the ground, he would first grow tobacco seedlings in seed beds in the late winter or early spring of the year, and 90 days later, these seedlings would be transported to the field that was prepared by the farmer. Now, the fields were usually created from newly cleared land or a field that had been burned to make sure it had the best soil for the crop. Usually, the farmer used a mule or a horse to plow and to break the soil. You see, transplanting these seeds was very slow work, and each one had to be planted individually into the ground. It's estimated that it took 30 man-hours per acre just to transplant all the tobacco seedlings. Over the next couple of months, the farmer and his family would work to keep the tobacco fields free of weeds and hope that the weather would be fair during the growing season. This typically took the form of hoeing the rows to keep the soil turned and pulling out the weeds. It was long and tedious work, and that entire field would have to be hoed at least 4 times before a harvest. Now, once it started getting close to harvest time, the plants would produce a bud near the top that had to be removed to make sure the leaves grew to their full potential. The folks called this topping the plant. And like everything else, it was done completely by hand. Now, while the farmer moved throughout the field, he was also on the lookout for tobacco hornworms, which ate the leaves. He would pull off each hornworm by hand and kill them. A farmer would need to have lots of help lined up for the harvest, and each person was assigned an important role. There would be primers in the field, sled boys driving the mules and the sleds, and the barn help, like the handers and the loopers. Most folks were experienced, and they knew the routine of putting in the tobacco. Harvest would usually begin on a blazing hot July day. The sun wouldn't be no more than an hour high, and the loopers and the handers would be getting ready in the tobacco barn by placing new balls of tobacco twine in tin cans that were nailed to homemade wooden looping horses that were used to string the tobacco on. Empty tobacco sticks were neatly stacked against the outside of the barn so they'd be ready. Now, the sled drivers were usually young boys who would hook up the mules to the empty sleds and they would head out to the fields, while the primers prepared for a long, hot day of filling those tobacco sleds, one after another. And before long, the field would be filled with sounds like Chinese firecrackers going off as the primers cropped the tobacco. Despite the hard work, there was usually an excitement in the air about putting in the first crop of the season. For one thing, it meant that there would soon be beautiful golden tobacco leaves cured out, ready to be graded and taken to the market to be sold. Everyone involved knew that money would soon be coming in after the long, lean winter. To ease the oppressive heat and the hard work, the workers would talk and laugh, play jokes on each other by throwing a hookworm on another worker's back, or splash each other with a dipper of water from the water bucket. Every now and then, a song could be heard floating through the air. Still, it was hard work, and salt tablets and plenty of water were standard equipment to help fight off the summer heat. The joy of finishing one row of tobacco was quickly rewarded with another row that seemed endless. If you were lucky, the field might have a shade tree in it or a watermelon patch nearby. Heck, even a garden with ripe tomatoes or cucumbers made for a good late breakfast. Now, by the time the sun was high in the sky at noon, the workers would try their best to get the tobacco gum off their hands and arms by washing them in a bucket of water and homemade lye soap, since that was the only thing that would take the gum off of your hands, just in time to get a belly full of pinto beans and cornbread. But once lunch was over, somebody would usually yell out, "I see that monkey out there in the field, boys." Now that monkey was the heat, and if you drank a lot of ice-cold water at lunch or earlier during the day, that monkey would jump right on your back and give you cramps all over. And if you got them, there was nothing they could do for you besides load you up in an empty sled and carry you back to the barn to cool down. Once the sled was full of the leaves, it went to the curing barn, where more people were waiting to string the leaves on sticks that were loaded into the barn for curing. The leaves were tied on the long sticks with cotton twine, with usually 90 to 100 leaves typically fitting on one stick. And once it was full, it was hung in the tobacco barn. A typical barn would hold 400 to 600 of these sticks. And once that barn was loaded with the sticks, it was ready for the curing process to begin. The tobacco was cured for the next 5 to 7 days, with the temperature alternating between low and high to achieve the ideal cure on the tobacco. Like a chef, each farmer had his own recipe for curing or cooking off the moisture. That's right. And a good tobacco farmer knew all the tricks to produce the finest tobacco. He wanted his tobacco to be more sought after than his neighbors, and therefore get higher prices. During the 3 stages of curing, temperatures in the barn would climb steadily upward from 120 to 135 degrees, then 160, and finally topping out at 180 degrees. And in the hottest part of the summer, mercury thermometers would be hung in the barn and outside as well. Every day, the farmer would observe the touch and appearance of the hanging leaves, and it would dictate his decision as to what the interior temperature should be. Rain or days with high humidity slowed the process, and the farmer would adjust the controlled temperatures accordingly. You see, the leaves had to be dry, but they still had to be pliable. Too brittle, and they would shatter. On a good year, the farmer would beam with pride as he watched his leaves loaded up and sent to the market. Oh, he had cared after them all year, and finally, those leaves would bring in just enough money to make it through the coming winter, just in time to do it all over again.